Imagine this. You are standing inside a burning stone castle. The air is thick with smoke, iron, and the sour stink of fear. Your ears are ringing from cannon fire that hasn't stopped for weeks. Outside these walls, 100,000 men are screaming your name. And beneath your feet, beneath the chapel, beneath the wine cellar, beneath the rooms where your children once slept, you have hidden enough gunpowder to tear the earth open. Here is the impossible question. If detonating your own home could annihilate the greatest army on earth, would you light the fuse? Pause. Because the man who answered yes did not survive to see the explosion. And what happened next shocked even the Ottomans. You think you know how medieval sieges end. You don't. Before we get there, let me promise you something. In the next hour, you will witness 5 moments so extreme that chroniclers at the time thought they were exaggerations, until mass graves proved them right. You will see a dying emperor carried to war in a sealed coffin so his army wouldn't lose morale. A knight who orders his own children to be killed rather than captured alive. A single gatehouse that eats tens of thousands of men like a meat grinder. A suicide charge so violent it permanently alters Ottoman military doctrine. And finally, a detonation so secret that history almost erased it completely. And when this is over, you will understand why the Siege of Szigetvár is whispered about, not celebrated. Because victory here tasted like rot. Now let me drag you back. It is the year 1566. Europe is bleeding. The continent is cracked down the middle by religion, empire, and pride. To the west, the Holy Roman Empire, fractured, paranoid, and exhausted. To the east, the Ottoman Empire, rich, ruthless, unstoppable. 4 decades, the Ottomans have been advancing like a slow-moving avalanche. Belgrade falls. Rhodes falls. Hungary shatters. Cities vanish from maps. And standing directly in the path of the largest army the world has ever assembled, is a fortress you've probably never heard of. Szigetvár. A mosquito of a castle. A damp, half-rotten stronghold surrounded by swamps. 3 layers of walls. 1 road in. No road out. Inside it, roughly 2,300 defenders. That's it. Farmers. Mercenaries. Croats. Hungarians. Germans. Men who smell like sweat and old leather. Men who know, deep down, that no relief army is coming. Outside? 100,000 Ottoman troops. Janissaries. Sipahis. Engineers. Artillery crews. And at their center, the most powerful man on earth. Suleiman the Magnificent. But here's the first thing history doesn't tell you. Suleiman is dying. He is 72 years old. He can barely ride a horse. His joints are swollen. His organs are failing. Some days, he cannot even stand without being held upright. And yet, he has come anyway. Because Szigetvár is not just a castle. It is an insult. It blocks the road to Vienna. And Vienna is the prize. Take Vienna, and Central Europe folds. Suleiman knows this is his last campaign. He wants to die a conqueror. But he has made one fatal mistake. Because inside Szigetvár waits a man who has already accepted death. And once a man stops fearing death, he becomes dangerous. His name is Nikola Zrinski. And if you met him on the road, you would never guess he was about to rewrite siege warfare. Zrinski is in his late 50s. His hair is iron grey. His face is carved with scars, real ones, not the decorative kind. He walks with a limp from a wound taken decades earlier. He is not rich. He is not famous outside the borderlands. But he is stubborn in a way that frightens even his allies. He has fought Ottomans his entire adult life. He has watched villages burn. He has pulled children out of mass graves. He has seen what happens to women captured alive. And now, he is being asked to hold Szigetvár. Not to win. Just to delay. Hold as long as you can, Vienna tells him. Zrinski reads the letter. He laughs. Because he knows what as long as you can really means. It means die slowly. Die loudly. Die buying time for men who will never know your name. And Zrinski agrees. But not in the way anyone expects. Inside the fortress, morale is collapsing. Food is low. Gunpowder is rationed. Men are already sick with dysentery. Zrinski gathers his captains. He does not promise victory. He does not promise survival. He promises only this. If the Ottomans want this castle, they will drown in it. Then he gives an order so dark that even hardened veterans flinch. Every woman and child in the fortress is to be hidden in the deepest cellars. If the walls fall, they are not to be taken alive. This is not cruelty. This is mercy, by the standards of the 16th century. And here is your first human story. One of the defenders is a man named Martin Horvath, a blacksmith. He has 2 sons, ages 8 and 11. On the night before the first Ottoman cannon fires, Martin sharpens his sword. Not for the enemy. For his own children. He does not sleep. Neither does Zrinski. Because Zrinski is doing something else. Something insane. Something secret. He is turning his castle into a bomb. Gunpowder is moved quietly. Barrels are rolled under chapels. Under stairwells. Under storerooms. Tunnels are dug. Fuses are tested. Only a handful of men know the full plan. If the inner keep falls, Zrinski intends to ignite everything. Not to collapse the walls, but to kill as many Ottomans as physically possible. This is not defense. This is premeditated annihilation. And if it works, it will be one of the largest deliberate explosions before the industrial age. But there is a problem. The Ottomans are already here. The ground trembles as the first cannons arrive. These are not medieval toys. Ottoman artillery is state-of-the-art. Bronze monsters that hurl stone and iron with enough force to turn men into paste. Janissaries chant as they work. Engineers measure distances with terrifying precision. And above it all, Suleiman watches from a silk-draped pavilion. He is wrapped in blankets. His skin is grey. He is not expected to live through the siege. But he wants to see Szigetvár fall before he dies. And so the bombardment begins. Day 1. The outer walls crack. Day 3. The moat fills with corpses. Day 7. The swamp runs red. Here is your second human story. An Ottoman janissary named Hassan ibn Ali writes in his journal. He describes stepping over bodies so thick they form a bridge. He describes the smell, sweet, metallic, unbearable. He describes watching a friend take a cannonball to the chest and simply disappear. And yet, morale is high. Because the Ottomans believe this will be quick. They are wrong. Every breach is contested. Every gate is trapped. Every night, Zrinski orders sorties. Small groups slip out into the dark. They kill silently. They burn siege equipment. They vanish. Ottoman soldiers begin sleeping in armor. They stop joking. Then comes the first shock. A cannon breach opens the outer wall. The Ottomans surge in. And immediately, the defenders light fires. Tar. Oil. Powder. The courtyard becomes an inferno. Men scream as their armor heats up. Janissaries choke on smoke. The breach becomes a furnace. Thousands die in minutes. Suleiman is furious. He orders the assault to continue. More men die. And still, the castle holds. Weeks pass. Disease spreads through the Ottoman camp. Supplies rot in the heat. And then, the unthinkable happens. Suleiman collapses. Inside his tent, the Sultan dies. The most powerful ruler in the world expires quietly, far from home. And now the Ottomans face a nightmare. If word spreads, the army could fracture. So they do something unprecedented. They hide his death. They embalm his body. They seal it in a coffin. They continue issuing orders in his name. The siege must end. Now. At any cost. This is where everything accelerates. The Ottomans unleash hell. Continuous bombardment. No pauses. No mercy. The outer and middle fortresses fall. The defenders retreat into the inner keep. Barely 600 men remain. They are starving. They are wounded. They are surrounded by the dead. And Zrinski gathers them one last time. He does not mention the bombs. He does not mention survival. He says only, "Today, we open the gates ourselves." You think it can't get worse? Wait. Because next, Zrinski will choose how he wants to die. And the Ottomans will learn what it means to win too late. The night before the final assault is quiet in a way that feels wrong. No shouting. No cannon fire. Just the crackle of small fires and the distant murmur of an army too large to comprehend. Inside the inner keep, 600 men wait. 600. That number matters. Because every one of them knows it will only go down. Zrinski walks among them. He does not wear armor yet. He wears a simple red cloak, soaked, over years of fighting, into a dark rust color that never quite washes out. He stops beside a young soldier shaking so badly his teeth are clicking. Zrinski does not tell him to be brave. He tells him the truth. "Tomorrow," he says, quietly, "you will not feel fear for long." That night, several men kill themselves. Not out of cowardice. Out of control. They choose the moment. Others pray. Some sharpen blades they will never resharpen again. And deep below them, in the bowels of the fortress, the powder waits. At dawn, the Ottomans assemble. This is not a normal assault. This is execution. The Janissaries form up in dense ranks, banners snapping in the wind. The artillery ceases fire, for the first time in weeks. This silence is deliberate. It is meant to break the defenders psychologically. Outside the walls, Ottoman officers shout promises. "Surrender now. Your lives will be spared. Your commander will be honored." Inside, Zrinski listens. He smiles. He orders the gates opened. Slowly, deliberately. The Ottomans freeze. This is not supposed to happen. A battered castle does not open its own gates. And then Zrinski appears. He is fully armored now. Mail beneath plate. Sword in hand. Pistols at his belt. Behind him stand the last of his men. They are not lined up. They are packed together, shoulder to shoulder. This is not a formation. This is a funeral procession. Zrinski raises his voice. "You will not take this castle," he shouts. "You will die in it." Then he turns to his men. And he gives the order that ensures none of them will ever retreat. Burn the bridge. The wooden bridge behind them, their only path back inside, is set on fire. There is no going back. Only forward. This is the first false ending. Because if you were watching from above, you would think this is it. The final charge. The end. You would be wrong. Zrinski steps forward. Then he runs. 600 men surge out of the gate, screaming. Not battle cries. Names. Gods. Children. They slam into the Ottoman front line like a thrown spear. And for a moment, it works. The Janissaries stagger. Men fall. Blades flash. Zrinski shoots one pistol point blank into a man's face, then draws his sword and keeps moving. This is not combat. This is slaughter in a phone booth. Bodies pile up so fast that men trip over them. Ottoman officers scream for order. But something strange is happening. The attackers are not slowing down. They are not defending. They are not reacting. They are simply killing until killed. Here is your third human story. An Ottoman cavalryman named Mehmed Çelebi later describes it like this. They did not fight like men who wanted to live. They fought like fire. And fire consumes oxygen. The Ottoman front line collapses backward. Hundreds die in minutes. But numbers always win. Always. The Ottomans begin to envelop the charge. From the sides. From the rear. Zrinski is hit. Once. Twice. An arrow punches into his shoulder. A musket ball tears through his thigh. He does not fall. He keeps going. Until a final shot takes him in the head. He drops. The charge disintegrates. The defenders are surrounded, cut down, butchered. Within minutes. It is over. The last defender dies. The gate stands open. The fortress is silent. And the Ottomans cheer. Victory. Finally.
Day pour inside.
And this is where history usually ends the story. But this is where the real horror begins. The Ottomans flood into the inner keep. They are euphoric. Laughing. Looting. Pulling bodies aside. They find the chapel. They find the armory. They find barrels of food they wish they'd had weeks ago. They find women. Children. Alive. And then. Someone lights a torch. Someone drops it. Someone screams. Because beneath their feet, the floor trembles. A fuse burns. Zrinski's fuse. The explosion is not a single blast. It is a chain reaction. Barrel after barrel ignites. The inner keep erupts. Stone lifts into the air. Men are vaporized. Others are flung against walls hard enough to peel skin. The blast is heard miles away. The ground shakes. A fireball punches skyward. Ottoman soldiers outside the walls are knocked flat. Inside the keep, everything dies. This is the second false ending. You might think this is the climax. The big moment. The bomb. But you're still missing something. Because the explosion does not just kill men. It kills certainty. The Ottomans are stunned. Thousands are dead in seconds. No one knows how many. Some estimates say 3,000. Others say 10. Some say far more. Bodies are buried under rubble. Burned beyond recognition. The commanders panic. They fear a trap. They fear more explosions. They halt the advance. And that delay, that hesitation, changes history. Because while the Ottomans are reeling, Vienna prepares. Remember why Szigetvár mattered. It blocked the road. It delayed the army. It bought time. Weeks. Enough weeks. The Ottomans never march on Vienna that year. Suleiman is dead. The campaign collapses. The empire turns inward. And Europe breathes. But let me take you back inside the ruins. Because the aftermath is worse than the battle. Ottoman soldiers dig through the wreckage for days. They find limbs fused to stone. Helmets melted into skulls. Bodies welded together by heat. They find Zrinski's body. Or what's left of it. His head is severed. Sent to Constantinople. As proof. But something else is found. Something disturbing. Hidden chambers. Collapsed tunnels. Gunpowder residue everywhere. The Ottomans realize. This wasn't desperation. This was design. Zrinski didn't fight to hold the castle. He fought to turn it into a grave. And that realization haunts the survivors. Because it means something terrifying. If one man could do this, what else are they missing? Ottoman doctrine changes. Engineers become more cautious. Sieges slow down. Inner keeps are approached with suspicion. And deep in the empire, the story spreads. Of a castle that killed an army after it fell. Of a knight who turned his home into a weapon. Of a victory that felt like defeat. Back in Europe, Zrinski becomes a legend. Songs are written. Poems. But they soften the truth. They make it noble. Clean. They do not mention the children in the cellars. The men sharpening knives for their own sons. The smell. The screams. Because that truth is too heavy. But we're not done. Because there is one last thing. One final twist history almost buried. The bomb was not the end. It was insurance. Zrinski never intended to detonate it while alive. He intended to die first. So the enemy would swarm in. So the kill count would be maximized. That is not heroism. That is cold calculation. And it worked. Now imagine being one of the Ottomans who survived. You won. You took the castle. And yet, your emperor is dead. Your army is shattered. Your campaign is over. You carry home stories no one believes. Stories of a dead man who killed you after he lost. And that brings us to the darkest question of all. Did Zrinski save Europe? Or did Europe simply get lucky that his madness aligned with its survival? Because next, in part 3, we're going to strip away the legend. We're going to expose the propaganda. We're going to ask whether this was genius or mass suicide weaponized. And when you hear what the defenders did in the final hours, what even their allies refused to record, you may never look at heroic last stands the same way again. This is where the myth starts breaking, and the truth starts bleeding through. You've heard the legend. Now let me ruin it for you. Because the story everyone repeats, the noble last stand, the glorious explosion, the heroic martyrdom, is a sanitized lie. The real Siege of Szigetvár is uglier. And once you see it clearly, you'll understand why so many chroniclers quietly looked away. Let's rewind again. Not to the battle. To the man. Nikola Zrinski was not born a saint. He was born into blood. The Zrinski family made its name fighting on the edge of civilization, where law collapses and survival rewrites morality. His childhood was not poetry and prayer. It was raids, ambushes, burnt villages, and retaliation so vicious it erased family names. By the time Zrinski was 20, he had already killed men in close combat. By 30, he had ordered executions. By 40, he had seen entire regions emptied. This matters. Because when people call him a defender of Europe, they imagine a knight in shining armor. He was not that. He was a border warlord. A man shaped by constant violence until violence felt like the only language that worked. And that is exactly why Vienna chose him. Here's something almost no one tells you. Zrinski was not ordered to hold Szigetvár at all costs. He volunteered. He asked for it. When other commanders refused the posting, knowing it was a death sentence, Zrinski stepped forward. Why? Part of the answer lies in guilt. Years earlier, Zrinski had failed. During an Ottoman raid, a town under his protection fell. The details are fuzzy, intentionally so, but we know hundreds were taken. Women, children, slaves. Some were later found in markets as far away as Damascus. Zrinski never forgot. And now, decades later, he saw Szigetvár as a ledger, a place to balance the account. This was not just strategy. This was penance. Inside the fortress, that mindset poisoned everything. The defenders were not being prepared to survive. They were being prepared to die well. And there is a difference. Zrinski rationed food brutally, but not evenly. Men he believed less reliable received less. Mercenaries were watched closely. One German Landsknecht tried to desert during the second week. Zrinski had him hanged at dawn. Not quietly. From the highest tower. So the Ottomans could see. This was not mercy. This was messaging. Now let's talk about the women and children again. Because this is where the legend cracks. The order was clear. If capture was imminent, they were not to be taken alive. Who would do it? Not Zrinski. He delegated. The task fell to the fathers, husbands, brothers. This was not a symbolic gesture. It was planned. Knives were distributed. Poison prepared. The cellars became waiting rooms for the unthinkable. And here is a story almost erased. A woman named Ilona, wife of a junior officer, refused. When her husband approached her with the blade, she screamed. She fought. She bit. Other women joined her. For a moment, the cellar became chaos. According to one fragmented account, Zrinski himself descended. What exactly happened is unclear. But afterward, there were no more screams. History does not record Ilona's name again. That silence is not accidental. You see, myths need clean heroes. And Szigetvár offers none. Not really. Now let's talk about the plan. The bomb. Because even here, the truth is darker than the legend. Zrinski did not invent this tactic on the spot. He had seen something similar years earlier, An Ottoman powder magazine detonated during a siege, killing both attackers and defenders. Most commanders would call it a tragedy. Zrinski called it a lesson. He spent years quietly studying gunpowder storage, blast patterns, confined spaces. By the time Suleiman marched, the idea was already formed. Szigetvár was simply the opportunity. And here's the crucial part. The defenders were never told the full plan. Most believed the powder was for sustained defense. Only a handful knew the truth. Which means many of the men charging out of the gate believed they were buying time for retreat. There was no retreat. They were bait. That realization alone reframes everything. Now flip perspectives. Let's go back to the Ottoman side. Because they weren't monsters either. They were professionals. The Janissaries especially, elite infantry, disciplined, paid regularly. Many were conscripts as children, taken from Christian families. Some may have come from villages not unlike those Zrinski once defended. Here's another human story. Hassan ibn Ali, the Janissary diarist, writes something strange after the explosion. He says he dreamed of the castle for months afterward. In the dream, it was still standing. But empty. No bodies. No soldiers. Just walls. And he says the walls were screaming. This is not propaganda. This is trauma. The explosion itself was worse than most modern retellings admit. Gunpowder does not explode cleanly. It burns. It expands. It shreds. Men near the center were not killed instantly. Some were skinned alive by pressure. Others were crushed under collapsing stone and suffocated slowly. Ottoman medics recorded injuries they had never seen before. Eardrums blown out. Eyes ruptured without external wounds. Limbs torn off without cuts. They had no language for it. They simply wrote, destroyed. And now comes the third false ending. Because you might think, surely this ended the fighting. It didn't. The Ottomans still had to secure the ruins. And securing them took days. Every collapsed corridor was feared. Every cellar suspected. They moved slowly, cautiously, paranoid. This mattered more than anyone realized at the time. Because that delay compounded. Supply lines strained. Disease spread. Morale sagged. And all of it while Suleiman's body quietly decayed in a coffin. The Grand Vizier, Sokollu Mehmed Pasha, faced an impossible problem. If he announced the Sultan's death immediately, the army might fracture. If he delayed too long, rumors would spread anyway. So he chose deception. Orders continued from the Sultan. The corpse was transported secretly. At night. Guarded heavily. Even some high-ranking officers never saw the body. This level of secrecy was unprecedented. And it only happened because Szigetvár refused to die cleanly. Here's the hidden consequence. Ottoman politics changed. Suleiman's death during a campaign, and the chaos surrounding it, terrified the ruling elite. Future sultans would become far more cautious about leading armies personally. The era of the warrior emperor began to end here. Not at Vienna. Not at Lepanto. At Szigetvár. Because one fortress proved that even victory could be catastrophic. Back in Europe, the myth machine went to work. Zrinski was portrayed as flawless. His harsher decisions quietly omitted. His calculated sacrifice reframed as spontaneous bravery. Why? Because Europe needed heroes. The Reformation was tearing it apart. The Ottomans were still a looming threat. A story like Szigetvár helped people sleep at night. But the truth is less comforting. Because if you strip away the poetry, what you see is this. A man used his own people as a weapon. A castle became a bomb. A battle became a psychological scar that outlived the dead. And history decided that calling it heroic was easier than asking whether it was necessary. Now ask yourself this. If the bomb had failed, if the fuse had gone out, if the Ottomans had discovered it in time, would Zrinski still be remembered as a hero, or as a madman who murdered his own? That question has no answer, which is why it's rarely asked. And we're still not done, because in part 4, we're going to follow the ripple effects. The revenge killings. The silent policy changes. The way Szigetvár haunted Ottoman engineers for decades. And most disturbingly, the way later commanders tried to copy Zrinski's tactic, with far worse results. This is where inspiration turns into obsession, and where one man's final stand becomes a blueprint for something far more terrifying. Stay with me, because what came next made even hardened veterans question the value of victory itself. After the smoke clears, history always lies. Not loudly, quietly. It edits. It smooths edges. It replaces screams with speeches. And nowhere is that more obvious than in what happened after Szigetvár. Because the siege didn't end when the walls fell. It metastasized. For 3 days after the explosion, the Ottoman army does not celebrate. They purge. Every surviving soul inside the ruins is hunted down. Wounded men dragged from rubble are executed on the spot, not out of cruelty, but fear. No one wants another fuse. Another hidden chamber. Another surprise. Engineers crawl through the ruins inch by inch, probing with poles like men afraid of waking a sleeping animal. And then the orders change. No prisoners. Not here. Not after this. Several Ottoman units go rogue, venting rage on nearby villages suspected of helping the garrison. Homes are burned. Wells poisoned. Livestock slaughtered. This is not recorded in official chronicles, but it appears in tax records years later, when entire districts vanish. This is how you know something terrible happened. Not because it's written, but because people stop existing. Now let's talk about revenge. Because revenge always follows trauma. And Szigetvár traumatized an empire. Janissary training manuals quietly change in the decades after 1566. Inner keeps are no longer rushed immediately after breaches. Gunpowder stores are assumed everywhere. Captured fortresses are cleared with slaves first. This is critical. Slaves. Christians. Men with no armor. No weapons. Sent inside to die if something explodes. This practice spreads. It saves Ottoman soldiers. It kills thousands of civilians. And it begins here. Because one man proved that a fortress could kill even after surrender. But Europe learns the wrong lesson. Instead of seeing Szigetvár as a warning, they see it as inspiration. Commanders start asking a new question. How much can I take with me? This is a poison thought. Because it reframes defeat as opportunity. Within 50 years, we see echoes. At Carnegie. At Eger. At dozens of unnamed forts along the frontier. Some commanders stockpile powder for last stands. Some rig gates. Some plan detonations. Most fail. Because Zrinski's success required perfect timing, secrecy, and enemy arrogance. When later attempts are discovered, the consequences are brutal. One Hungarian captain is flayed alive when his bomb is uncovered. Another commander's family is executed publicly when his plan is betrayed by a deserter. The Ottomans adapt quickly. The copycats die horribly. And yet, the idea never fully disappears. Here's the darkest irony. Zrinski's tactic makes siege warfare longer, not shorter. Because attackers grow cautious. Defenders grow desperate. Both sides dig in deeper. More civilians are trapped. More towns starve. The border becomes a grinding machine that eats generations. One spectacular sacrifice feeds a century of smaller ones. This is the cost no ballad sings about. Now let's return to Zrinski's body. Or what remains of it. His head is sent to Constantinople. It is displayed briefly. Not mocked. Studied. Ottoman officials reportedly debate whether to honor him or erase him. Ultimately, they choose something stranger. They bury him quietly. No monument. No inscription. Because honoring him would inspire others. And erasing him would admit fear. So they do neither. They let his name rot. Back in Europe, the opposite happens. Zrinski becomes larger than life. His death is romanticized. Paintings depict him dying heroically in sunlight, never in smoke, never in confusion, never covered in blood and ash. Plays portray his men as unified, eager martyrs. The cellar scenes vanish entirely. Ilona is never mentioned. Martin the blacksmith disappears. Because those stories disrupt the narrative. And narratives matter more than truth. Now pause. Because this is the moment most videos would end. Hero dies. Empire retreats. Europe survives. Fade to black. But something else happens. Something almost no one talks about. The psychological aftershock. Veterans of Szigetvár are not celebrated when they return. They are avoided. Their stories are disturbing. They don't describe battle, they describe being hunted by a dead man. One sniper officer reportedly refuses to sleep indoors ever again. Another janissary deserts years later, claiming walls whisper. Modern historians would call this post-traumatic stress. At the time, it is called possession. Exorcisms are performed. Men are reassigned. The army quietly bleeds experience. All from one fortress. And then there is Suleiman, the Sultan who never lived to see the end. His death is announced weeks later. The official narrative says he died peacefully, victorious. But insiders know better. He died before the castle fell. Which means the greatest Ottoman conquest myth of the century is built on a technical lie. And lies corrode empires from the inside. Now consider this. If Szigetvár had fallen quickly, if Zrinski had surrendered, if there had been no explosion, Suleiman might have lived long enough to march on Vienna. The campaign might have continued. History might look very different. So yes, Zrinski's stand mattered. But not because it was glorious. Because it was disruptive. It broke tempo. It shattered assumptions. It forced an empire to hesitate. And in war, hesitation is lethal. But now comes the hardest truth. The one that no statue can answer. Was it worth it? Was it worth turning a castle into a tomb? Was it worth weaponizing fathers against their children? Was it worth creating a precedent that killed tens of thousands more later? History cannot answer this. It only shows us the bill. And the bill is written in blood. In part 5, the final part, we're going to stand at the end of this story. Not with kings. Not with generals. But with you. Because this siege forces a question that still matters today. When survival is on the line. How far is too far? And who gets to decide? Stay with me. Because the ending you think you know is not the ending that matters. Stand still for a moment. Not in the middle of the battle. Not during the explosion. After. When the smoke has thinned just enough to see what's left. Because this is where the Siege of Szigetvár actually ends. Not with fire. With silence. The ruins smolder for weeks. Rain turns ash into grey sludge that seeps into the ground. Bones surface. Then sink again. The swamp absorbs everything. Blood, metal, memory. Szigetvár is technically an Ottoman victory. On paper. But no one rushes to rebuild it. For years, the site is avoided. Soldiers rotate past quickly. Locals whisper. Travelers detour miles out of their way rather than camp near the ruins. This matters. Strategic locations are not abandoned unless something goes wrong at a cultural level. Szigetvár didn't just kill men. It poisoned meaning. Let's return one last time to the people history barely remembers. Martin the blacksmith. He survived the charge. Not because he fought better. Because he tripped. A falling body knocked him aside moments before the explosion. The blast buried him under debris instead of tearing him apart. He is dug out days later. Burned. Deaf. Half mad. He does not return home. There is no home. Records suggest he lives another 20 years in a monastery, unable to speak clearly, refusing meat, flinching at loud noises. He never takes vows. He just exists. This is victory's residue. And Hassan ibn Ali? The Janissary diarist. His journal ends abruptly a year after the siege. The final line reads, God forgive us. We won. Then nothing. No death record. No pension claim. No trace. Men like him slip through the cracks of history because they don't fit clean categories. Not heroes. Not villains. Just survivors carrying something too heavy to explain. Now let's talk about legacy. Because legacy is where the lie hardens. In Croatia and Hungary, Zrinski becomes a national symbol. Streets named. Statues raised. Poems memorized by children. But notice something strange. The statues always show him before the explosion. Sword raised. Eyes forward. Alive. Never afterward. Never broken. Never burned. Never wrong. Because societies don't immortalize doubt. They immortalize certainty. But here's the thing. Zrinski himself never asked to be remembered. There is no surviving letter where he claims glory. No manifesto. No demand for recognition. If anything, his actions suggest the opposite. He chose a solution so extreme it could never be repeated casually. He burned the bridge, literally and morally. He made himself impossible to follow safely. That's not how men seeking fame behave. That's how men trying to end a story behave. So what do we do with him? Hero? Fanatic? Strategist? Madman? The uncomfortable answer is, all of them. And that's why Szigetvár still matters. Because it exposes something we prefer not to look at. Every society praises sacrifice, but rarely asks who paid for it. Every culture celebrates last stands, but never lives in the aftermath. Szigetvár forces the question. When survival becomes absolute, does morality become optional? Zrinski answered yes. History, desperate for meaning, answered thank you. The dead answered nothing. And here is the final twist. The one that reframes everything. Szigetvár did not stop the Ottomans forever. Vienna would be threatened again. Wars would continue. Borders would bleed for centuries. Zrinski didn't end the conflict. He just delayed it. Which means his sacrifice bought time, not peace. And time is the most expensive currency of all. Because someone else always pays later. So when people say, one man saved Europe, understand what they really mean. One man forced history to blink. Just long enough. Now imagine this. You are Zrinski. You know relief is impossible. You know surrender means slavery and annihilation. You know resistance means everyone dies anyway. You have one weapon left, choice. Not between life and death, but between how death happens. You choose to make it count. You choose to weaponize inevitability. You choose to leave a scar so deep it changes behavior. That is not courage in the clean, storybook sense. That is resolve sharpened into something dangerous. And now you know the real story. Not the song. Not the statue. Not the patriotic summary. You know about the cellars. The knives. The deception. The bomb that waited for its audience. You know that victory can rot. That heroism can be cruel. That survival sometimes demands choices no one should have to make. And because you know that, you now stand apart from 99% of people who will only ever hear the legend. They will cheer. You will hesitate. And that hesitation, that discomfort, is the true legacy of Szigetvár. Because it reminds us that history's greatest moments are rarely clean. They are burned into the ground. Just like that castle. Just like the men who died in it. And just like the truth that almost disappeared with them.